So very lecture heavy. I strongly suggest you take notes. Take notes however you need to take notes. If you want to pull up PowerPoint, take notes on the PowerPoint. That's cool. If you want to do whatever, you know. Ultimately, it's your responsibility to take notes. This content, the way I sort of do presentations is I follow the standard business style. Okay, that means there's not a lot of words on the slides. So it's up to you to write down what you don't know. Does that make sense to everyone? Because in a business presentation, you know, there's a couple key things you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have good presentation skills. Okay, part of that is not reading directly off a slide. All right, so if I sat here and read directly off a slide, half the class would be asleep, right? Okay, so it's important to understand that. So what we'll be covering today, start off with managers and the decision-making process. Then we'll go through the business analytic process. We're going to talk about the major types of analytics. They are descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. We'll talk about those. And we'll also cover presentation tools. Now, if you look at the schedule, you may notice that we have 2 days for this lecture. My guess is we won't need a full 2 days. So what we'll probably do is next class, whatever we don't finish today, we'll finish that, and then we'll begin on some of the Excel stuff with analytics. Does that sound good? So, that's the agenda. Got a quick little video. Before I play it, let me do some stuff so I don't get copyright struck on this video. So basically what the video says is you have, you guys familiar with Dilbert? Okay, so Dilbert has his boss, and he's talking with his boss. And his boss wants him to do stuff with data, okay? And specifically, Dilbert responds back with that data set is wrong, okay? And sort of with that in mind, as we think about what that means, is that the data set has inaccuracies. So Dilbert's boss responds back saying, well, why don't you average them? And he says, I can average them, I can multiply them, I can do whatever. But the idea is that if the data is wrong, you know, it's meaningless. All right, and there's different types of error. Of course, we have random error, and that's what that would be referring to, where we don't know how wrong any particular observation is. Okay, that contrasts obviously with things like systematic error. Okay, systematic error, there's some either multiplier applied that has inaccuracies. So let's say that we have a data set. I'll just draw it on the board quickly. Okay, just someone throw me 3 numbers. Any 3. 15, what else? 12, and 7. Okay, so let's say that we had systematic error. Okay, that may be these are all multiplied by 2. Not 3, 2. Okay, so 15 times 2 obviously is 30. It's obviously going to be 24. It's obviously going to be 14. Okay, so if we have systematic error and we know what the error is, we can obviously correct for that pretty easily, right? Okay, another type of systematic error would be addition or subtraction. So let's say we had that same data set, 15, 12, and 7. And let's say that for whatever reason, they all had 6 added to them. You don't know why, but they did. Okay, so that's obviously going to give us 21, 18, 13. Okay, that you can correct for. All right, but let's say we have the same data set, 15, 12, and 7. And let's say there's some completely random error. So what that would look like is you'd have, say, 29, 3, and 11. Is there any way to get from the original data, from the randomized data back to your original data with that? No. That's what the video is about. Okay, it does a better job and much quicker, but that's what we're referring to. So any questions so far? All right, so the manager role, one of the primary things, so we have a company. We know that management is going to provide a lot of input into what the company says and does. Okay, and one of the things we're probably concerned with is the idea of productivity. So think back to your physics class. Who can tell me about the law of conservation of matter? What does that mean? Yeah. Exactly right. Okay. So that means that if I have this marker, okay, let's say I have one marker. Can I multiply this into 2 markers? Why not? So when I say multiply it into 2 markers, I don't mean cut it in half and have half of one marker twice. I mean, can I literally make 2 markers with this one marker? Okay. No, because I'd be violating the law of conservation of mass. Now, if we're a company, that's exactly what we want to do. That's exactly the goal of a company. The idea of productivity being you should be more productive. You should get more out than you put in. Okay? Does that blow anyone's mind? Think about profit, profitability. Central to a profit-seeking company, as it should be. Pretty obvious, right? Okay? Means that your inputs are going to be less than your outputs. Okay? Because your goal in business is to make money. And part of that is productivity. If you're not very productive, you're not going to be very sustainable. All right, let's think back to a type of business. Okay? I don't mean to shatter anyone's dreams or anything, but restaurants. All right, you guys know what the failure rate of a first-year restaurant is? It's 90%. Why? Why do 90% of businesses, or restaurants specifically, fail within 1 year? Could be a cost issue. Could be a pricing issue. Could be a demand issue. It could be a saturated market. It's 1,000, well, probably more than 1,000. Okay, there's a very large number of reasons for why. Okay, but it goes back to productivity. Okay, if a restaurant is productive, you think they're going to be sustainable? Yeah. So we're going to talk about that. Keep that in mind as we go. All right, so you have a decision, and the decision could be many different things. We're going to talk more about decisions in the next couple of slides, but the idea is that management decides how to allocate resources. They decide which products to sell. Okay, they decide how they display the products. It's all decided. Those are all decisions. They decide who to hire. They decide who to fire. They decide pretty much everything. All right? And when we talk about decisions, it may be important to have data to back up said decisions. So for instance, let's say we're making pricing decisions. What type of data will we need for that? Would we want to know what our competitors are doing through a benchmarking process? Absolutely. Okay. Would we want to also know what our costs are? Okay. Because let's face it. Let's say that our competitors are charging $3. And let's say that our costs are $3.50. Should we charge $3? Why not? So your productivity would be negative, right? Okay. And you would lose. All right. So what should you do in this case? Well, there's a couple options you would have. Okay. The first should be pretty apparent. Figure out how to reduce your cost. Okay. Another would be to simply not offer that product. All right. So back in from the period about 2000 to 2010, several big PC manufacturers chose to exit the PC manufacturing industry. Okay, the reason for that was that the margins were incredibly low. Most PC manufacturers were receiving sub 5%. Is that a terrible margin? Okay. If you're inside of a highly rivalrous industry, that's what you're going to see. Okay. My advice would be to not be in an industry with a 5% margin. That's horrible. All right. Because with 5%, it doesn't leave much room for anything, does it? All right. So, in general, if you have this situation where you have $3 and your costs are $3.50, leave the market. Either figure out a way to lower your costs or just step out of the market. Doesn't mean you can't offer other products or services. Just means you probably shouldn't be selling something for less than your cost. Questions? Does that make sense? All right. So the three primary roles of a manager. So they have an interpersonal role, okay? And in the interpersonal role, this is where they're going to be mostly interacting with people, okay? Managers should be people, right? Okay? So they may be serving as a figurehead, okay? The face behind a company. Think about Elon Musk, okay? You immediately, when I say Elon Musk, most of you probably immediately think of Tesla. You think of his company, okay? That means he's serving as a good figurehead. He's who you think of pretty much immediately. All right? Being a leader. All right? You have to lead people. A lot of things involved with that. You have to get people to buy in to your changes. So if you're wanting to make some change to the company, it's important to get buy-in. Okay? If you don't get buy-in, as we're seeing right now, what might you get? Might you get employee turnover? Yeah, probably so. All right, in general, you think about what does turnover cost your company? Well, in general, it's going to cost your company recruitment expenses, could cost them lost business, could also cost the company higher salaries. Okay, these are all three things you'd want to avoid, obviously, as a business. So being a leader is an important role, as well as also possibly acting as a liaison between two departments or functional units. Okay, so let's say you have an accounting functional unit within your company. Let's say you have a sales functional unit. Okay, you may have an interpersonal role to act as a liaison between those two. All right, informational. As the name would imply, this is all about disseminating information. Okay, so think about communication. How is most communication done in a formal setting in a business environment, modern time? Okay, it's not a trick question. How's it done most of the time for formal communication? Email, okay? It's a role of managers, all right? Other things would include serving as a spokesperson, okay? So you're making some change, serving as a spokesperson, you're providing education regarding that. Okay, and then lastly, decisional. So decisional is all about making decisions on behalf of the company, like we talked about. These may be decisions for resource allocation. These may be decisions for hiring and firing decisions. These may be decisions for where to put a new facility. Okay? All of these are decisional. So those are the three primary roles that managers have. All right, different types of decisions. So this is looking specifically at the decisional role. There are three types of decisions we may see. Okay, the first is going to be structured decisions. With structured decisions, there's going to be very little uncertainty regarding the outcome. So, for instance, you're looking at accounts receivable. You probably have some process in place for accounts receivable as a company. There's very little uncertainty in that process. All right, you receive a bill, you confirm the PO number, the PO order number is something that your company had, and then you pay the bill. Is there any uncertainty there? Very little, okay? I contrast with unstructured decisions. So unstructured decisions, the outcome is almost completely unknown. So for instance, R&D, research and development. If you invest $1 million into R&D, what will the outcome be? Do you have any idea? No, you don't. Okay, even if you were at a company and you invested the $1 million for R&D, you still wouldn't know what the outcome would be. Not to mention, is that a reversible or irreversible investment? Okay, it's irreversible. Once you've invested into R&D, let's say it doesn't pan out, you can't just get that $1 million back or whatever you spent. So R&D is going to be not only unstructured, but it's also going to be highly uncertain, right? Because you don't know what you'll ultimately receive. Now that contrasts with semi-structured. So semi-structured has elements of both structured and unstructured. And on a multiple choice question, I would never be so unreasonable as to have semi-structured as a choice. Does that make sense? So you don't have to memorize this chart, all right? This chart is up here to sort of show what some examples would be. But again, if I'm asking something, it's going to be very clear, cut, and dry between structured and unstructured, okay? So then, of course, you also have different levels of an organization. Okay, you have operational. It's going to be the day-to-day stuff. That's going to be non-managerial employees. Okay, you have strategic. That's going to be your top-level employees, most likely C-level. Okay, so the C-level referring to CEO, COO, CTO, sometimes CMO, those sorts of positions. All right, then you have managerial. It's going to be your mid-level of the organization. So you have mid-level managers. So think about that as like manager and below. All right, and you have different tasks assigned to each one. So accounts receivable, the CEO is not sitting there paying the bills manually, are they? Okay, unless it's a very small company. So that's going to be done at the operational level. Okay, stuff like budget analysis, short-term forecasting, that's going to be done at the mid-level. Okay, your mid-level managers. And then we have like investment portfolio, where you're going to put your new warehouses. That's a strategic decision, but it's pretty structured as well. Okay, so any questions about this? Am I going too fast? Too slow? What do you think? Just right? Okay. Like I said, if I go too fast, if I need to repeat anything, just let me know. Happy to do so. Or if I need to explain something a different way. All right. So the whole goal of business analytic process is not to have one process for all companies. It's to have something that's going to be scalable to the organization's needs. So, Walmart's business analytic process may be different and is different than Target's. Why? Yeah. Exactly. So we'll talk about strategy here on the first discussion. But in general, Michael Porter identified two primary strategies for business: cost leadership and differentiation. Okay, and with Walmart, their motto, at least at one point was, I don't know if it still is, low prices every day. Okay, that sounds a lot like cost leadership, where they're competing in the market based on their cost of goods sold. Okay, I shouldn't say cost of goods sold. I should say the price of the goods to the consumer, or customer rather. Okay, so cost of goods sold would be very different than that. It's actually irrelevant. And then differentiation will be where they focus on a differentiated experience. Most of the time a better experience, although there can be some instances where you can actually have an inferior experience that you market as a differentiating feature. For instance, you guys heard about those restaurants that provide bad service on purpose? Okay. Not something I'd be particularly interested in. I like good service, but some people like to be talked rudely too. Okay, some people don't. All right. So differentiation, you have a free market. if enough people want to visit a restaurant that has bad service on purpose, can they be successful? Sure. Okay? I tell you what, there's nothing like a free market. All right? So scalable by needs of the organization. Not every organization will have the same goal in mind. Even if they have the same goal, they may not have the same method of achieving that goal. All right? So you may have one single application that you use. You may have 1,000. All right? This is highly dependent upon the organization's needs. But the idea here is with business analytics, the goal in general is to have this be enterprise-wide. Because what we're trying to remove are what's called information silos. Okay? So information silos, it's going to be whenever you have information that is only available to a small part of the organization, most likely one functional unit. So for instance, let's say that accounting had a system, and only accounting could access it. And that system had information that no one else in the organization could access. That's an example of an information silo. You guys familiar with a silo? Big thing that stores grain. All right. Why it's called information silo, I don't really know. But that's what it is. Yeah. S-I-L-O. So this is enterprise-wide. We're trying to remove those information silos. And really, in a lot of cases, this may be used to help sort of have organizational transformation. And, we can think of a couple key transformations over the history. All right, so let's think about a company like Best Buy. All right, 2012, Best Buy was not doing so well. They brought in a new top management team. They turned things around. I think in present day, I think they're still doing fine financially. Okay, that's organizational transformation. So there's actually a really cool video on YouTube of an interview, I think it was on Fox Business, where they interviewed the CEO. And he was taking them through some of the changes that they made to enhance the customer experience. Okay, and part of what he said was, well, Amazon able to get you something in 2 days, we can get you something in 15 minutes for 70% of the country. Because the idea was that 70% of the country lives within 15 minutes of a Best Buy. Now, whether you think that's true or false, I'll leave that up to you, but their stock has certainly performed substantially better. Their revenue has increased, and most importantly, their profitability has increased. Okay, because you can increase revenue, like I've said, and not increase profitability. And to me, that's not very useful in most circumstances. Now, you can make an argument for a new company that you may see some use to that. Okay, and possibly, but for me, that's not something I would particularly like. I'm not someone who thinks it's a good idea to spend money to lose money. If I'm going to spend money, I want to make money, right? Does that make sense? But hey, I'm not here to tell you what to do. So different stages of the analytical development process. Okay, and this is derived from Davenport's 2010 book, Analytics at Work. I recommend you read it. It's a pretty short little book. You can probably check it out at the library, but it's not required reading by any means. So the idea here is that companies are going to begin analytically impaired. And analytical impairment means that the company has no existing analytics throughout their organization. So nothing at all. Okay, then they're going to begin to implement some localized analytics. Okay, so localized analytics refers to having analytics that are done within a single functional unit. Okay, and just to clarify, in case I haven't said it yet, a functional unit is basically interchangeable with a department. Okay, so you have a IT department, it's a functional unit within the organization. That's what that's referring to. Next, you have analytical aspirations. Okay, analytical aspirations are going to come from the top management team, specifically the C-level team, wanting to implement analytics throughout the organization. They haven't yet done so, but they want to. Okay, and then once they actually implement them, they become an analytical company. That's a company that uses analytics throughout their organization. Probably the trickiest one to distinguish is the final stage, which is analytical competitor. So an analytical competitor what they're doing is they're competing based on analytics. So they are pricing based on analytics. They are deciding which products to sell based on analytics. They are doing most decisions through analytics. So do those 5 stages make sense? Do I need to repeat anything? You got your hand up in the back? Okay. Like I said, I'm always happy to repeat if I need to. Because like I said, this information is not really written down anywhere. I will be posting the recording though, so at least there's that. All right. So you're a company and you're wanting to do some localized analytics. How do you get started? So the first thing to always consider is a strategy. Okay, strategy is central to any business's anything. Okay, that should guide the decisions of any company. Be it small decisions, be it large decisions. Okay, if you're a cost leadership firm, you're competing based on what? Cost. Okay, so specifically the cost you charge the customer. Okay, so in general, if you have a product, it's going to have some cost of goods sold associated with that product. And you want to sell it for more than the cost of goods sold, but if you're cost leadership, obviously you want to sell it for the lowest price possible to your customers. Or I shouldn't say the lowest price possible. That may not be true, actually. A better answer may be to sell it for a price that is better than your competitors. Okay, because it's not necessarily always going to be more or less expensive, okay? So that's just what we're talking about when we're talking about it in that context. All right, so consider your strategy. Once you've done that, manage your data. Okay, you can't do data analytics if you don't have data collected and ready to be analyzed. So this is where you would sort of begin to put everything in what we'll call an enterprise data warehouse. Okay, so enterprise data warehouse is going to be basically a big transactional database. It's going to be accessible to the entire organization. All right, then you're going to analyze the data. Okay, so 3 different types. We're going to talk about those in a couple slides. But in general, do descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. Okay, and then lastly, you act on it. Okay, so if you analyze your data and your costs are too high, you figure out ways to reduce the cost. All right. So we're going to come back to those types of analytics, but for now, let's talk about presentations. Okay, you got a question? So you're considering your organization's strategy. Okay, so if you're cost leadership, your analytics should be focused on how to reduce costs. If you're differentiation, maybe your analytics will be focused on how to offer a different product or service experience, how to reach out to maybe wealthy customers who would be willing to pay for that, those sorts of things. Does that make sense? Any other questions? All right, so first thing to consider with a presentation, who are you presenting to? So let's say that I'm presenting to a group of executives. Okay, am I going to dress like this to a group of executives? Why not? It's not formal enough, okay? Now let's say I'm presenting to a group of undergrads. Okay, am I going to dress like this? Obviously. You can tell because I am, okay? So consider your audience. Okay, don't just think about what you're dressing like. Think about what you're going to say. So in general, you know, some people practice their presentations for hours before they're given, okay? Personally, I don't find that works well for me. If I practice for hours and hours, I get a little bit nervous, okay? So personally, I like to wing my presentations. Probably shouldn't admit that, though, all right? But do whatever works best for you, okay? So it may be that you want to spend 10 hours practicing a presentation. You may want to do it in front of the mirror, okay? You may not want to do any of that. Whatever works, okay? Think about what data you want to present. And more importantly than the data itself, think about what the meaning of the data is. And that's where we're going to talk in a couple slides about the different types of analytics. Consider what biases you may have. And consider the ethics behind that, okay? Like I said, I'm never here to tell you what you should believe. Okay, that's not my role at all. But throw an ethical question at you. Let's say that you're presenting to your manager. And let's say that your manager wants to secure the funding for a new position. Okay, and let's say that your manager is implying that's what they want you to find. Okay, is it possible to perform the analysis in a way to achieve that result? Yeah, always. Okay, should you? In other words, should you present to the biases of your audience? Why do you say not? Okay. I'll put you on the spot here. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. What if you were told you'd be fired if you didn't do it that way? What if you had to? Okay. Who would present the bias? Why would you do that? Be a tough thing, wouldn't it? All right. And I imagine that the job market could play into this as well. Okay. So let's say that the job market is amazing. Okay, there's, let's say, 10 million jobs available. All right. Wages are increasing. Let's just say that. Okay. Would that change your answer if you could go get another job tomorrow that paid 20% more? All right, let's say that it's 2008. And let's say there's just a handful of jobs, maybe like a couple 100,000 available across the entire country. Probably very few in your area and your discipline. All right. Then would that change it? It's real stuff. I can sit here and say, oh, you should never present to a bias. I've done it. I'll do it again. It's up to you all. Okay? I'm not here to tell you what you should believe when it comes to ethics. Does that make sense? It's a personal decision. So, some different presentation tools we may use. All right? You may present a formal business report. It's going to be a typed document. And the idea is that you're breaking down the problem. Okay, so you're starting off with an executive summary, talking about the problem, then you're going into a problem description, and then you're going to find potential solutions. You're going to analyze each solution, and ultimately you're going to provide a recommendation. And of course, you justify the recommendation. And you can really throw a lot of stuff into a business report. Okay, our final project in here is actually a business report. All right, you got a poster. Put information on a poster, present it. You've got your options there. Pretty straightforward. Slideshow. Again, the important thing with a slideshow is you're not just reading off the bullet points. Okay? It's like I was saying, that'll put half the class to sleep. I've taught, I think, around 1,100 students. Okay? I've only seen 2 students fall asleep in my class. Okay? So that's 1 out of 500. Not half bad, right? All right? So let's not add a third one to that. But, yeah, I'm pretty sure that one of those students just had a long night, by the way. I don't know about the other one. I think it might have been something else there. Anyway, enough about that. So presentations. Presentations, of course, are going to be wherever you are presenting in front of people. Okay, so be formal or informal. You got a lot of options for this. All right. So this would be, of course, a formal presentation. All right. An informal presentation may be sitting at a boardroom table and you're just talking, okay? So you're not necessarily having bullet points, you're not necessarily having an agenda, it's more of a discussion in an informal setting. But most of the time you're going to use some combination of these, to where you're not just using a single method, you're using several together, okay? So, representing data. All right, so you can use charts or tables for this. All right, so a chart, we've done several of these in this class already, where basically you just have the information laid out, pretty similar to a table. Of course, a graph, It's going to allow you to communicate that information visually. Some people prefer graphs. Some people prefer tables. Some people prefer raw data. Okay? So, that's where it goes back to your audience. If you know that your audience prefers graphs, how should you probably present things? With a graph, exactly. Okay? And, you can certainly use multiple methods to do this. That's totally fine. All right, a visualization is just going to be wherever it's some sort of animated thing. So we have an example in a couple slides where it's looking at the 3 perceptions of the cause of death. So they have actual cause of death, they have perceived causes of death, and they have what the media reports on for causes of death. All right, and lastly, a dashboard. That's going to be a real-time, most likely a web page. It doesn't have to be a web page, though. And it's going to update the information in real time. It's going to allow you to have graphs. It's going to allow you to have charts. It's going to allow you to have the raw data just freely available. So here's an example of a visualization. And like I was saying, the idea here is that this actually updates as we go. Okay? So, as we sort of progress in time, it's going to change the causes of death. All right? So this is what actually causes death. Then, if this were on a web page, you'd see that it changes to what people believe causes death. Okay, so cancer stays about the same, but like some of these others down here, even though they're a very tiny percentage of overall death, people believe that they cause death more often. All right, and then of course what the media reports on, they're going to report on the less common causes of death more often. All right, they're not reporting on someone having a heart attack. They're not reporting on someone having cancer. Okay, they're reporting on the strange. I wouldn't say the strange. I would say the less frequent. So things like some of these down here. All right. So like I was saying with a dashboard, the goal here is to quickly view real-time information. Okay. So some common components of this would be the ability to drill down. So what I mean by drill down is you start at a high level and you can easily click and you can change things and get more precise information. So let's just say that I had 2015 through 2021 sales. So the first thing I could do is I could drill down by year and I could select the year I'm interested in. Let's say I'm interested in 2021. Okay, and then from there, you'd be able to select by quarter. Let's say I'm interested in Q4. And from quarter, of course, you can select month. So I'm interested in December. Okay, and then from month, you can go by week if you wanted. Say I'm interested in week 2. And if you were so inclined, you could go by day. Why not Tuesday? All right, you can even go by hour and by minute and by second if you have the data to do so. All right, that's what drill down is. Start at a high level and you increasingly become granular in your unit of analysis. All right, just think about you starting at a year and then up at a day. Let's say you're starting at the entire world sales, you're ending up in Southwest United States sales. Does that make sense? Key performance indicators. There's going to be 1 or 2 indicators for a company, most likely some sort of metric, like maybe it's going to vary widely by firm and industry, but let's just use McDonald's as an example. All right, so on their dashboard for their drive-through, what do you think they might have? So they probably have drive-through time, right? The average time it takes for a drive-through order. Now, do they want that number to be high or low? Why? Get more people, exactly. Not to mention it's a better customer experience, all right? Who wants to wait 30 minutes for a hamburger? Okay, I don't see too many hands up. All right, you got a hand up? You like a 30-minute hamburger? At McDonald's specifically? Okay. Better customer experience. Now, probably don't go to McDonald's for the customer experience at all, but that's what we're referring to. All right, status access. It's going to be whether or not something can be reached, okay? So most of the time what this is going to be is like a status for a website. So what it'll do is every whatever interval you set, probably going to be 15 seconds, it's going to send what's called a ping request to that website, and if you can reach it, it's green. If you can't, it's going to be red. Okay, trend analysis. So trend, we're going to talk about that as we go, but the idea behind trend is that we're looking at not only what's happening today, not only what's happened in the past, we're looking over time, okay? So a trend is going to be between 1 and 3 years. Looking at that window to see whether we're growing or declining. And then lastly, exception report. That's going to be an automatically generated report upon the satisfaction of some condition. So let's go back to our McDonald's example. All right. Let's say that we have an exception report set to automatically order new fast food cups, okay, whenever we go below 20% of our inventory. So that's going to be an exception report. It's automatically generated upon the satisfaction of the predefined condition, which can be any condition you want. All right, someone throw me their favorite business. Home Depot, all right? What is a commonly bought product or service at Home Depot? A light bulb, okay? So let's say that they have their light bulb inventory. Did he say something else? Okay, 2x4. Well, either way, okay? So let's say light bulbs and 2x4s are important, okay? So we want to be notified when we get below some threshold of that inventory, all right? Because that allows us to go ahead and purchase more. And that's a very beneficial thing for a company because is there going to be pent-up demand for a light bulb or a 2x4? Possibly. What does that depend on, though? Depends on your local competition, right? So, in Durango, you know, we have a Home Depot. Do we have another hardware store? Do we have an Ace? Do they sell 2x4s? Okay. So if Home Depot's out of 2x4s, am I going to get in a pickup and I'm going to drive down to Ace and pick up a 2x4 if I need a 2x4? Possibly. All right. So if I do that, is that likely to have pent-up demand or not? Unlikely to have pent-up demand, right, in that case. Okay, because with a light bulb in particular, that's an even better example. All right. Home Depot is not the only seller of light bulbs. You can go down to Walmart, and they probably have what you're looking for. All right. I don't think we have too many other stores. I don't know. But anyway, you get the idea. Is if you can go get a product somewhere else, you're not going to have pent-up demand for it because you've already obtained the product from somewhere else. Does that concept make sense? So what pent-up demand is it's the idea that whenever you cannot get something, do you still want it? All right. So take a new car, for instance. All right. If you want to buy a new car, are the car lots pretty much empty right now? So a year from now, are you still going to want a new car if you don't have a new car? Probably. That's pent-up demand. Does that make sense? And it's spelled P-E-N-T. Here's a sample of a dashboard. I just found it online. So you can tell it's got several KPIs. It's got a lot of graphs and visualizations. And what's really cool is with any of this stuff, you could click on it and you could adjust the parameters, drill down into stuff like the revenue. Really cool stuff. So that's just an example of a dashboard. All right, so some various tips for presenting your data very clearly. It's very important that you focus on readability. Okay, you make sure that whatever you're presenting can be easily understood by whom you're presenting to. All right, that kind of feeds into clearness. All right, you want to make sure that everything that you're presenting is clear. Okay, you're not having too much going on. You're not having nothing going on. You're having the just right amount of stuff present. So same thing with information. You're not having anything extra, but you're not having not enough either. Okay, then also appropriate colors. Now this is an interesting topic for several reasons. Okay, first of all, I think around 4 to 8% of the population is colorblind. Okay, I believe the most common type of color blindness is red-green color blindness. All right, so with that in mind, a lot of times we think of green as being good, we think of red as being bad, right? Well, what if someone is colorblind and they can't distinguish red and green? So in business, there's another color we can represent with good. It's black. So you heard Black Friday, right? Okay. Why is it called Black Friday? Exactly. The idea is that throughout the whole year, your company may have been operating in the red, but come Black Friday, your revenue will increase and hopefully put your company back in the black. Okay? So black in business would be something that's good. It could also be green. You may want to consider that. Also consider different cultures. Okay? There are many, many cultures in the world that green is bad and red is good. So, it's okay to use red and green if you want, but just make sure that you're mindful and that you say which is good, and also specify what the criteria for good is. Because, for me, I look at a 5% margin, I think that's horrible. Okay, but it's still positive. So you may say it's good. Okay, and I may look at that and say, not going to be in business for very long, Going to have to find a way to either reduce cost or to increase the price. Those are your two options. All right, so let's talk about appropriate colors. Here's an example of a bad graph. All right, why is this bad? Too much going on. You can't tell any of these bars what they are because there's too much information on them, right? It's 3D. All right, 3D may look cool, but if you're trying to easily gain information, why not just use a 2D bar chart? Would that not be a much better way to see it? Okay, also, look at this information. It's by year, right? Could you even get away with having a line chart? It's continuous, or somewhat continuous, arguably continuous. You could do this with a line chart. Would that be a lot easier to read than this? Definitely. What about this guy? What's wrong with it? Okay, you can't tell the colors apart for one thing. You got gold. Okay, you can't tell which one of these golds is which. You can't even hardly tell what this one is, much less some of these down here. You don't know what percentage that is. You don't have a clue. Okay, 100 items is an awful lot for a pie chart, right? So that's something to think about. Got a good graph up here. Why is this good? It's easy to read. Okay, you can tell distribution of it. It's got a good title. It's got a good key down here. You can easily tell all the information. All right. This one right here. What do you guys think of it? So I like how they use both shapes and symbols. Because it's not even just about color blindness. Let's face it. Most business printers print in what color? Black and white. All right. So not only color blindness, but you're printing on black and white. This allows you to still see. Whereas with using the same shape, you wouldn't be able to see the pattern there, right? All right, so what they're trying to show is actually pretty meaningless, in my opinion. They're saying that revenue is in some way related to employees dressing business casual. That doesn't make a lot of sense, all right? I don't think there'd be a very strong relation, if any. If it were, it'd be spurious. So for instance, look at what they're showing here. Revenue's increasing at the end of the year. Well, that's expected for any B2C company, right? Okay, so that's pretty self-explanatory there. So some various tools you may choose to use for any sort of analytic process. You could always start with Excel. Okay, the advantage of Excel is that it's installed on most things. Okay, not everything, but most things. You can present with PowerPoint, of course. So put whatever information you need. It's a good way to kind of keep yourself on track without going on too many tangents. I'm a little bit guilty of going on some tangents here and there. Word. Of course, with Word, you would do things like make a business report. Okay, make some sort of formal document. Various visualization tools. Stuff like Power BI and Tableau. I believe that we have some visualization courses in our data analytics minor at the Fort, so keep that in mind if it's something you like, as well as data analysis tools. So some of the stuff we'll be using in here next semester, or not next semester, next unit I mean, I will be using some stuff for data management tools. All right, I don't have those up there, but that's just gonna be stuff like structured query language. All right, so that's some stuff on specific tools there. I think this is a good stopping point. We've only got a couple minutes left, so we'll pick up talking about the specific types of analysis. And then after that, we will go ahead and jump into the stuff in Excel. Any questions about anything today? All right, I hope you all have a great weekend. Don't forget the Lab 2 is due on Monday. I will see you all then.